We are going to bring on our guest, Adam Kissel. The book is A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Adam Kissel, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, when I read the title of the book, first of all, you're with the Heritage Foundation. You're a graduate of Harvard. I'm a graduate of Yale. And so we are experts because of our experience at these ostensibly elite institutions of how they are not so wonderful. And so I was thrilled when I saw your book, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. So what is the thesis of the book? And then let's talk about it.
The thesis of this book, named Slacking, is that you might have thought that the legacy elite institutions in the Ivy League are providing a great education to their students for the future leaders of America and the world, but the fact is they're not. If you look at the core curriculum offerings across the Ivy League, the humanities and social sciences are terrible in what they offer to students. Narrow, biased, and so on.
By the way, forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't mention the actual title of the book. I mentioned the subtitle. The book is Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Well, listen, you and I know the truth of this. We've seen it up close. But what led you to write a book about it?
A generation ago, when the National Association of Scholars was looking at curriculum, they said, do the best universities still require Shakespeare and Western Civ and American history? And the answer was, no, they really don't require those anymore. And I thought, it's been about 30 years. No one has done a good curriculum study for a while. And today the question is, can you find even one good course on Shakespeare or Western Civ or US history? And the answer turned out to be barely one or two at each institution. Furthermore, when October 7th happened and we saw the crazy things that happened on college campuses and the amount of anti-Semitism on campus, I said, I bet there's a link between bad curriculum, bad admissions, and what we're seeing on college campuses. Turned out to be correct.
Unfortunately, there's no doubt about that. But I'm just glad, I have to say, that you've written a book about this. And again, folks, the book is Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Now, I was at Yale in the 80s, and I saw the beginnings of this deconstruction, critical race theory. All of this had invaded the English department. So people like me kind of naively thought, oh, going to Yale, I'm going to get a classical education, Shakespeare, all this great stuff. No, you're not. It basically didn't exist anymore in the 80s, ladies and gentlemen. And in case you're wondering, how far back does the rot go? Well, luckily, in 1951, 50 or 51, comes out with his book, God and Man at Yale, where he is telling you about the communist atheist takeover of the Yale of the 1940s, the faculty at that time in the 40s when he was there. So this goes way back. But like anything else, it's the long march to the institutions. It takes a long time before it's on full display for everybody. And I guess I would say to people, I wouldn't dream of sending my kid to one of these Ivy League schools unless they were like a William F. Buckley, who's there just to make trouble. But it's that bad, isn't it, Adam, that we're at a point where you're sending your kid into a Marxist indoctrination camp effectively?
It really is, especially in the humanities and social sciences. Just to take Yale as an example, the arts and humanities requirement says, we're going to teach you to understand and appreciate the highest achievements of humanity. Well, that's great until you find out which courses they teach, such as Introduction to the Occult Sciences, Drink Culture,
Wait. Sorry. Say that again.
Introduction to the Occult Sciences meets your arts and humanities requirement at Yale.
Introduction to the Occult Sciences.
Topics range from astrology and alchemy to recipes for summoning demons and angels. This is the real Yale course.
I just don't know if I just need to lie down and take a nap or jump off a cliff. I mean, when we realize it's that bad, like we know it's bad, it's this bad, folks. So if you are like some lunatic giving money to these institutions. Bill Ackerman, it took him, many years until October 7th happens, and he realizes that the kids at Harvard are basically fire-breathing anti-Semites to finally stop giving money to Harvard. A lot of people have given money to these institutions thinking, oh, it's so wonderful. It's not wonderful. This is basically what you're funding. And we've only begun here. Adam, please continue. But I just had to stop and rant for a moment. Forgive me.
No problem. So other Yale courses to stick on the Bulldogs, drink culture, history, ethics, and aesthetics of cocktails. So you meet your humanities requirement by learning about cocktails, but not only cocktails, how drink culture is bound up with colonialism and imperialism. That's from the course description. Also narrow, Beyonce makes history, the Black radical tradition. So
Okay,
instead
hang
of
on.
reading,
We have to hit pause. This is too much, folks. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. I'm talking to Adam Kissel, who's written a brand new book called Slacking, a guide to Ivy League miseducation. So, Adam, you are giving us chapter and verse because a lot of us, we know theoretically that things are very, very bad, but you're giving us the specifics. And you're talking right now, folks. Adam Kissel is not making this up. You can read the book Slacking. You're telling us of actual courses at Yale University. Anybody who thinks that this is some elite institution where you're going to get a good education, that is simply not true. And Adam, you're giving us the sad facts and receipts of the matter. So keep going.
So we're talking about courses that meet the gen eds at Yale, the core curriculum, making you an educated person. So, but instead of reading Homer and Beowulf, you're learning about Beyonce. You're learning about East Asian martial arts films. Or maybe you're taking this course called Pop Sapphism, which surveys the lesbian presence in pop culture. That's all at Yale. But at Princeton, a whole course just on shoes. At Penn, decolonizing French food. So these courses are narrow, biased, tendentious, question begging. They're not giving you the best that has been thought and said in the world.
Yes, that's the understatement of the century. I mean, I say these kinds of things a lot on this program and anywhere I go, but most people find it hard to believe. And I think the real point is that generations of these students going to these elite institutions, quote unquote, have been, as you put it in your title, miseducated. And they are now going to law firms, going into corporations, going into government. They do not have the basics. And so if you see Yale or Harvard or one of these schools on a resume, ladies and gentlemen, I would be inclined in most cases to throw it, put it in the round file, to skip it, because these kids are being indoctrinated. But I mean, what you're just saying, Adam, these are so, they're not just pathetic, but the trendiness of it. I mean, my goodness, to have to lure some dumb 19-year-old into taking a course by mentioning Beyonce. It's so, there's a level of pandering going on. It's amazing.
It is. Just to take Harvard now, you could take this course called Zombies, Witchcraft, and Uncanny Science. You could take Ethnic Studies and Education. But look, there's a path forward. There's a narrow path. If you want to be a striver instead of a slacker, you can take the few remaining good courses. So if I'm an employer, I say, I want to know what you actually took. I don't care what it says on your diploma. I want to see what it says in your transcript.
Well, that's pretty smart. In other words, if you're stuck at one of these institutions, there are some courses you got to look, but they're there.
Yes, and every chapter in the book has a list of the courses that you can take if you want to be the striver, and a list of the courses you can take if you want to be the worst slacker you can be. So at any of the 8 Ivy Leagues, even Brown, you can find courses that are serious. You read the classics of social and political thought. You learn real things about other civilizations. So you can do it. You just have to search for it, and slacking the book helps you get there.
Okay. So, but tell me again, Adam, what led you to say I actually want to write a book about this? Is it just have you always had an interest in this kind of thing?
Ever since I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago, when there was a big battle over the core curriculum in 1999, I said, I want to understand how to articulate what makes an educated human being and citizen. And I got into curriculum study 25 years ago. Then, when October 7th happened and the Ivy League showed its true colors too often, I said, we need to tell the public what's really going on in the Ivy League. Let's figure it out. I did a chapter on Cornell. I said, this is worse than I expected. We need to write the whole book. I got two co-authors and we did it.
Well, I think, there's always the proverbial silver lining. Things finally have gotten so bad, so nakedly horrible that people are paying attention. I mentioned Bill Ackerman. Thank the Lord that this philanthropist woke up to see that he was funding, the Intifada effectively, that he was funding radical, anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic is a nice word, Jew-hating lunacy. And he said, okay, I'm going to stop doing that. I think many people have woken up because things are so bad. The most obvious example was the scandal, the Claudine Gay scandal at Harvard, that you think that this woman, and again, anytime, and this is the horror of DEI, anytime you see a person of color or a woman, you kind of have to suspect, even if it's not true, and that's why it's so pernicious, that, oh, well, they were hired because they're a woman, or they were hired because they're a person of color, which does a disservice to every woman and every person of color who actually achieves anything. So here you have Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, involved in a plagiarism scandal, the president of Harvard University. That's kind of, I think that was a good wake-up call for people.
One of the jokes about Harvard is that the hardest thing about it is getting in. Another joke about higher ed is that we'll pretend to teach and you students pretend to learn, right? So, and then the third joke about Harvard is that it's a hedge fund with a college attached to it, right? So we need our, what I call legacy elite institutions to become truly good again and great again by teaching high quality students admitted on the basis of merit with high quality faculty hired and promoted on the basis of merit with high quality curriculum. So there is one silver lining in the Ivies, which is STEM. If you're an engineering student or a math student, you can find lots of good courses within your discipline and even in your core classes. Unfortunately, you still have to take humanities and social sciences because you need to get well-rounded. But if you're going to go to the Ivy or send your kid to the Ivies, you should really decide to choose STEM, science, technology, right?
Yeah, that's the good news. It's hard. It's not that they don't try, but it's hard to make biology or chemistry, really.
Well, I have to tell you though, that at Cornell, the only really bad course at Cornell in the sciences, you watch Disney movies about animals, you compare them to real animals, then you pretend you're one of the animals in animal society, and it meets your science requirement at Cornell.
Okay, now Adam Kissel, you're just making stuff up now. That can't be true. That cannot be true.
Even worse, the Alumni Association did a whole article about how great it was and how much fun students were having in that course. You can read about it in Slacking or online. Sad to say, but it's the only really bad course at Cornell in the sciences.
In the science.
Meets your science requirement.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, again, there's nothing particularly new here for people like me or you, but the fact is you're drilling down and you're showing the details. In case anybody wants to know the details, here they are, folks. These are the classes being offered at these formerly elite institutions. Do you get in the book? Do you get into? I guess for me, what goes hand in hand with this kind of lunatic political radicalism, this leftist radicalism, is a denigration of America, a denigration of ideas of honor and dignity. They really don't ever, you're not going to go to a place like Yale or Harvard and get a course on American history where Washington is lifted up as a hero. It's part of the whole gestalt, I guess, of these places that kind of thinking is everywhere. But do you get into that specifically in the book, the issue of character or how they kind of sneer at the idea of honor?
We do, and unless you take Harvey Mansfield's courses at Harvard, there's almost nobody to take in history or political science who will give you a fair view of Western American civilization and the founders. And a lot of this comes back to the idea that the American dream, the false idea that the American dream has always been a myth, that the middle class has been pushed away by capitalism, that capitalism has been our problem instead of our solution, that American and Western values are irretrievably tainted, and that all of the oppressed groups of every category need to be in solidarity together to overcome capitalism, the family, Western values. So these courses reflect that mindset.
We'll be right back, folks, talking to Adam Kissel. The new book is Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. Welcome back. We're talking to Adam Kissel. The new book is Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. So, Adam, you were just talking about this idea that's essentially ubiquitous in these formerly elite institutions, that America is a bad thing. Now, I grew up in a working class home. My parents didn't go to college. And I remember, entering Yale and seeing this for the first time, seeing that patriotism is sneered at. America is a bad thing. Ronald Reagan, the boogeyman of the day. Oh, he was bad. He was a fascist. I mean, this stuff is in the 80s. So we're talking 40 years ago. These ideas were reigning at Yale University, and I'd never encountered them before. This kind of mocking attitude. It's really spiritually very, very dark. I even remember there is a statue of Nathan Hale, beautiful statue, outside the dorm, Connecticut Hall, where he was a student. That dorm still exists. It's a beautiful 18th century building. And when it was put up, which would have been around World War I, there was this idea of honor, that this man gave his life for his country. That idea was absolutely wiped away, and these ideas would be treated with cynicism and sarcasm.
Well, a lot of the legacy elite institutions no longer think of themselves as American universities. They think of themselves as universities of the world. They have no good reason to promote American values, certainly not American civics as it used to be taught. And since our high schools do such a poor job in teaching civics, a lot of the education required to be an excellent citizen and human being, that responsibility is left to the colleges. A bunch of the public colleges do a very nice job at this, but the more elite you get, the worse it gets in teaching you respect for the core American principles, equality under the law, like Harvard Law School. I'm not sure how much they like the Constitution there, for instance, right?
Well, what's the big surprise? I mean, or the Yale Law School, produced Barack Obama and the Clintons. I mean, this goes way back, folks, and it's horrifying. But I guess the question comes up, Adam, about federal funding. I am thrilled that President Trump has said, "Hey, you want some federal funding? Well, we've got some problems. You're not going to get the federal funding unless you do a few things." We don't. I don't think we've ever had. I know that we've never had a president with the guts to challenge these institutions in this way?
Well, the only good analogy is maybe from the 1950s and 60s when colleges and schools were violating civil rights in the area of race. Now, places like Harvard and Columbia have had to admit that they've been violating civil rights in the area of anti-Semitism. And Harvard, I think, has a 300-page report explaining from the inside what has been going on there. So the Trump administration has said, well, the law says if you are violating civil rights, you can't get federal dollars, and we're going to hold you to that. So I support the president's and the agencies in their mission in doing this, because it's not curriculum, even though these problems are infused throughout the curriculum. You don't want the federal government in charge of curriculum at colleges, but you do want to think about having them preserve equal rights for their students and faculty. And that's the angle that they're using productively to get some of these institutions in shape.
Well, I think you're overstating by saying getting these institutions in shape. Just saying we're not going to allow Jew hatred on our campus, that doesn't exactly turn them into, the Yale of 1850. Let's be honest here. This is tiny stuff. So I'm just glad that the president has the guts to call them out on this. I guess he's also called them out, though, on the DEI stuff, has he not?
Yeah, so when DEI becomes illegal DEI, and he's always careful to say, we're not going to police viewpoints on campus, but we are going to police the kind of DEI that runs into discrimination. If you're saying that students are so bad because of their identity that they are inherently a bad person, it's legitimate to go after them. So you're right, the culture on campus is broken in so many ways. Just fixing the Jew hatred, anti-Semitism is a tiny piece of that. Calling them out on curriculum is a significant piece if they could actually change. Calling them out on free speech and DEI problems where they are enforcing a culture of political correctness. So I was in college in the early 90s at Harvard, Brown. Early 90s were when people started talking about political correctness. That's another big part of the culture. And it's what fed into the DEI of today, saying there's only one right way to look at the world through the lens of oppressors and oppressed. And if you don't, we don't like you here on our campus. So the Trump administration has, I think, pushed back in a healthy way on that from within the federal role. And then states have done a great job too, in some cases, North Carolina, Florida, Utah, Ohio, right? Saying universities in our state also need to stop discriminating.
We'll be right back, folks. The book is Slacking. Welcome back. I'm talking to Adam Kissel, who with his two co-authors has put together a book called Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation. So you and your co-authors have gone through the Ivy League, and there's a chapter on each one and the courses they offer. You mentioned that there is a course at Yale on the occult. Again, unless you went to one of these schools, which of course I did, you cannot imagine how bad it is. And of course, it's gotten infinitely worse with every decade. But tell us more about some of these courses being offered. And folks, just to be clear, we're not just nitpicking. We're not saying, oh, look at this, but most of it is okay. Most of it is not okay. That's what's so horrible. And that's why I would say to anybody, in my view, the Ivy League is dead. They've been dying. It's like the New York Times. You really cannot take it seriously. It went over the edge into the abyss at some point with the New York Times, I think was 2016 with the election of Donald Trump. They had always been left leaning, but then they decided really to double down and they went into the drink. And I think we have to be honest that that's really what's happened at these Ivy League schools, and not just the Ivy League schools, all these elite institutions.
It's really too bad. Some might trace this back to Ralph Waldo Emerson and the Romantic era, saying, we don't have a classical education model for you. We want you to just pursue your passions and interests. We're not going to give you a clearly articulated curriculum anymore. Hitch your wagon to a star and go wherever you want, even into the occult, right? And that romantic model versus the classical model leaves you with courses like what I've been talking about. So you could take Decolonizing the Mind on the effects of colonialism and post-colonial power relations on the field of psychiatry. That's Yale, meets your arts and humanities requirement. You could take Queer Girlhood at Cornell. Again, Beyonce Nation. Here's a good one. Intersectional Disability Studies meets one of your core requirements at Cornell. Now, what's interesting about Columbia is that on paper, they still, for the last 100 years, have had a Western civilization core. And unfortunately, what you get are international anti-Semitic graduate students teaching the core, and they're saying, oh, we have to teach this, but we don't like it anyway. So they're undermining what the faculty have said they thought a great education should be. And then if you look at you'd say 20th century part of the Columbia core, it's all Marx and critical race theory. So they ruined the ending of American history and Western civilization, even at Columbia, which starts out so well, and you end up with thinking that America and the West are bad.
Well, I mean, again, I remember, I'm pretty sure it was 1983. I took a course on the 19th century novel, and the professor, was an angry feminist who, imagine reading Middlemarch through that lens. It just spoils everything. These beautiful books. So even if you take a course where you're reading George Eliot's Middlemarch, it's infected. And so again, this is why my big takeaway is the Ivy League really is dead, folks. It's been dying for a long time, but here we're getting chapter and verse of these insane courses. And again, these are just the courses. Imagine what the climate is like in the dining halls and on the campus if these are the courses. These are what the tenured adults are teaching. What does that tell you about the climate on the campus? And so that's a bigger part of the story, isn't it, Adam? That for me, it was less the courses than the overall climate, the milieu.
Yes, and so if you go to the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression website, you can see an annual survey of hundreds of institutions about the campus climate. They ask you, are you willing to say something outside the mainstream in class, or are you too scared to do it? Are you even willing to, and on the other side, would you be willing to commit violence against a speaker who says something you don't like on campus? The numbers are scary in the number of students who are afraid to speak on campus, and then conversely, those who would commit violence to stop a speaker they don't like on campus. And that's across hundreds of institutions. We have a long, long way to go, and not just in the Ivies. And I'll tell you one reason is that the faculty of the second-tier institutions were trained at the Ivy League, and they're bringing that mindset into the second-tier and third-tier institutions.
Well, this is where we are. This is where we are. And again, I just want to say the Ivy League is dead, and all these elite institutions. I mean, you can go down the line, Williams College, Amherst, Georgetown, one of the worst of the worst. They have lost their minds. They've been losing their minds for a long, long time. And I just say this because I think people need to know it. I think we always assume that these elite institutions are somehow still worth attending. My friend Charlie Kirk wrote a book called I think it's The College Scam. You would really do better taking some online courses with Hillsdale or Jordan Peterson Academy, at least in my estimation, by far, than wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars at these Marxist indoctrination camps. And again, I'm not exaggerating, folks. This is true. Adam, we've just got a minute left. What else can we say?
Well, my niece is at Florida State University getting a great education. My nephew is at Clemson University studying computer science and AI, getting a great education. And state schools are doing a really good job in the red states because the senior administration, the trustees, and the legislature are starting to hold them accountable. But if you go to Sarah Lawrence College and you get Sarah Lawrenced, meaning ostracized for having the wrong view, That's what New England is. I'm going to be teaching at Trinity College in Hartford starting in the fall, and I'll be able to give you a report from the inside on what things are really like. So it'll be interesting to find out uh, how bad New England really is.
Well, before I transferred to Yale, I was at Trinity College in Hartford. And in 1980 and 81, I got a spectacular education there. They had a guided studies program. That's a long time ago, but I really got a great education in the 3 semesters that I was there. Then I went to Yale. Crazy. Okay, Adam Kissel, thank you, folks. The book is Slacking, A Guide to Ivy League Miseducation.